Hey, truth seekers, welcome back. Zach here. In this video, we're going to talk about NASA and its Freemason roots. And from there, we're going to talk about how because NASA lies, that does not mean the earth is flat. There's a lot of people in the truth seeking community who think because NASA lies, that is proof the earth is flat, which it is not. We're going to have a adult conversation about the flat earth theory and why it is an inferior model by a lot to the spherical earth model. By those words, please stay tuned. I'm making this video to help all of you who are arguing and claiming that the earth is flat. Understand that I care about you. I want to help you out. I want you to seem like a more credible person. If you're a truth seeker, you're very important. And what you're not aware of, if you're caught up in the flat earth theory, is that that theory was put on us to discredit us, to divide us, to make us look absurd. So let's begin with NASA. NASA is an organization that has always been run by Freemasons. Very quickly, let me show you this. This is a video. I will link this video in the description. It is a tour of the Freemason Lodge in Washington, D.C. Listen to this little clip about NASA and Freemasonry. Listen carefully.
I learned that almost all of our astronauts have been Freemasons.
Did you hear it? He learned at the Freemason tour that almost all of our astronauts have been Freemasons, and that should come as no surprise. The United States of America, a nation founded by Freemasons, almost everyone in government is a Freemason. Almost everyone in any high position of authority in this nation is a Freemason, down to even the principals at schools throughout this nation. This is a Freemason nation, the United States of America. We'll talk about how United States sums to the same thing in gematria as Freemasonry. Anyhow, NASA was established by Congress July 29th, 1958. That was a date with numerology of 113. The word mainstream equals 113. The word dishonest equals 113. The word Scottish, as in Scottish Rite Freemasonry, the branch of Freemasonry that runs this nation, Scottish equals 113. It was a date with 41 numerology as well. USA equals 41. 41's the 13th prime. Think about the 13 colonies, the 13 stripes on the flag, the 13 years of public school programming. So Congress created NASA July 29th. NASA opened its doors October 1st, 1958. The name NASA, it is an acronym spelled with all capital letters. There's something known as Francis Bacon gematria. That's where lowercase a through lowercase z are worth 1 through 26. Uppercase a through uppercase z are 27 through 52. 26 letter alphabet, the lowercase letters are 1 through 26, the uppercase are 27 through 52. N's the 14th letter, so capital N, what you do for each letter is essentially add plus 26 more. Capital N is 40, capital A is 27, capital S is 45. That's a typo, A should say 27. Whoops. Again, when you read my blog, be careful. I make a lot of these posts in haste, and I make small typos. But anyway, NASA becomes 40 plus 27 plus 45 plus 27. Lowercase a would be 1. Uppercase A is 27. So if you add those four letters together, they sum to 139. And again, NASA, established in the year 58. Look at the gematria of Freemasonry. Using the alphabetic order, 139, using the English reduction method where you make each letter a single digit. In English reduction, Z's the 26th letter, right? But Z's not worth 26, it's worth 8 because 2 plus 6 is 8. You break each letter in the alphabet down to a single digit, then you add. Freemasonry becomes 58. just like the year it was established. Here's some other relevant words. NASA, space, think about the stars. Think about the stars on the flag. The word star, 58. The word science, 58. Freemasonry, secret society, annuit coeptis, what's on the dollar bill above the all-seeing eye. And think about NASA and dollar bills. On that pyramid with the all-seeing eye that says annuit coeptis above it, there are 13 layers of bricks. Again, 13 colonies, 13 stripes. What happens to 58 if you break it down? 5 plus 8 becomes 13. You see? 13, very relevant to Freemasonry as well, the number of rebellion. With regards to NASA opening its doors in October, October equals 33. So does the word planets. Planets equals 33, and the most 3 recently discovered planets, which are Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Well, now they tell us Pluto's not a planet. But Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto were all discovered on dates with 33 numerology. And down in the description, I will link some blog posts that I wrote this summer. I also have videos if you want to go back and watch the videos. You can read the blog posts a lot faster. But anyway, I put out some detailed blog posts about the discovery of the 3 planets, how they were all discovered on dates with 33 numerology, plus more. The discovery of Neptune and Pluto are hilarious. Hilarious. The planet Pluto discovered the same year Disney put out the cartoon Pluto. The word Pluto equals 84. It was found 84 years after Neptune, discovered by a U.S. astronomer. United States of America equals 84, so does Jesuit. Anyway, the recent history of the discovery of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are all by the number 33. And that isn't to say that those planets don't exist. It is to show that the Freemasons who control our history do things by the numbers and claim things happened on certain dates just so it fits into their numerical structure of, however you want to put it, controlling the information that's given to the masses. All throughout history, our history books, our science texts, they're filled with dates that have much Freemasonic relevance. So the date Congress funded NASA, July 29th, it was a leap year 1958. That's the 211th day of the year, the day leaving 155 days remaining. 211 is the 47th prime number. And 47, very important to the Freemasons. They have something called Euclid's 47th problem about how to establish foundation. Has much to do with mathematics. Notice the word foundation equals 47. Foundational day, the funding of NASA. Foundation 47, framework 47, Christian 47, authority 47, gavel 47, judge 47, agent 47, obey 47. The thing to know about NASA and understand is this is a real scientific program with a lot of funding, infinite resources behind it. And no doubt they're making real science, real discoveries, improving flight, learning more about this world. At the same time, the information that they put out and give the masses, it's mostly all just bunk. And that's pretty much true for everything going on in this world. Our government uses all sorts of money for research and development for so many things, and then keeps that knowledge from the masses, uses that knowledge to exploit the masses. We live in a world of advanced technology and understanding. It's just that we, the people, we're not in the know about it. I wouldn't be surprised at all if money that goes to NASA also goes straight into the pockets of the tyrants at the top as well, With regards to July 29th, leaving 155 days left in the year, the word science in Jewish gematria equals 155. Again, established in 58, science equals 58 using the alphabetic order. The word Christianity also sums to 155. And since we're going to be talking about the flat earth theory, many Christians, they want to believe the earth is flat because in the Bible it says the 4 corners of the earth, which makes you imagine a flat surface. The thing to know about Freemasonry is they're not so much against Christianity. There's many Freemasons who are Christians. The majority of spiritual leaders in churches, synagogues, mosques. Across all religions, there are Freemasons. You know, the one rule to join Freemasonry is you have to believe in the, however they put it, the supreme creator, or whatever the language is, a greater being. If you get to the top, what you'll find out, what Freemasonry really worships is Satan. But many Freemasons who are involved don't know. They don't realize what they've signed up with. The date NASA opened its doors, October 1st, that's the 274th day of the year. Remember what 74 is to Freemasonry. Masonic equals 74, Jewish 74, occult 74. It's the day that leaves 91 days left in the year. If you count every number 1 through 13 and add them together, they sum to 91. 13 has the connection to 91. So that's just a little bit about NASA. If you want to come to my blog and search all the many posts I have on NASA and exposing their wrongdoing, their fraud over the years by the numbers, you know, please search through my blog and my video channel. Done a number of videos on NASA by the numbers. The reason we got the moon landing, which was no doubt a hoax, in 1969, during the time of Cancer, the astrological sign, is because exactly that. Cancer is represented by the number 69. In Gematria, Cancer equals 44. So does the word space. So here's this major space feat in the time of Cancer. Cancer is ruled by the moon. You know, this is astrology. Cancer is ruled by the moon. A moon landing in the time of Cancer in the year 69. Remember how we saw David Bowie, who was fascinated with the moon, die just after he turned age 69, right after he released his album about the song Lazarus. No doubt a Freemason himself. So anyhow, I have a lot of work on NASA. NASA, no doubt, fraudulent organization, lies to the masses, always lies by the numbers. All that said, that doesn't mean that the earth is flat. Remember, NASA's not who declared the earth to be flat. The earth has been considered to be a sphere based on the scientific workings worldwide for centuries, well before NASA. I'm going to link this post right here about Neptune and Pluto and Disney's Pluto down in the description, along with the NASA post. I'm also going to link this post, which also talks about Uranus and more. But real quick, just understand these things about the flat earth model. A lot of people say, if the earth's not flat, then why is the United Nations using the flat earth symbol? Well, you guys, think about it. It's called the United Nations. How else are they going to show all the nations of the world unless showing it on essentially a two-dimensional map that encapsulates all the nations? Here is the reality about the flat earth model versus the spherical earth model. And just think about this. If somebody gives you two models of anything and one shows a lot more proof and worth, why would you ever choose the lesser model? Listen, because this is all true. The flat earth model does not explain what causes the orbits of the sun and moon. It does not. Eric Dubé cannot explain it. Jeranism cannot explain it. I was just on the phone the other morning debating with Jeranism about the flat earth. He said, I have no idea what causes the orbit of the moon and sun above the flat earth. And I said, well, don't you think that's an important thing to know if you're going to declare the earth is flat? He said, it's ongoing research. So, okay, it's ongoing research. I respect that he wants to research it further, but you're going to have to come up with answers if you're going to claim that the earth is flat. Because look, the flat earth model, again, does not explain what causes the orbits of the sun and moon, but the spherical earth and the way we're taught about it does. Planets orbiting, the gravitational pull. People in the flat earth are saying there's no proof of gravity. But again, there's something that keeps us stuck to this earth. There's something that pulls the oceans towards the core of the earth. And the explanation we have is gravity. You know, there's a mathematical formula for the way things fly through an air. If I throw a ball, it's gonna make a perfect arch. There's some sort of equation at work. Is it magnetics? Is this world all magnetics, electromagnetism? Very possible. You know, we're able to take the energy from the sun and turn it into other energy to power light bulbs and more. That's another conversation. Moving on. The flat earth model cannot predict lunar and solar eclipses. The spherical earth model can. Think about it. We live in a world where at the beginning of the year, they tell us when all the eclipses will happen at certain parts, and they have them predicted out years in advance. Think about this. Science, you guys, is not an enemy. Science is a tool, a way of coming to understand the world we live in. And there's a lot of honest scientists in the world, and through honest science, they figured out things such as eclipse schedules. Think about that. Think about that. When these people make these predictions for when the eclipses will happen, they happen. The flat earth model cannot explain eclipses. And when you watch these flat earth videos, they're going to ancient texts and they're talking about, hidden things in the sky that rarely appear that might be causing the eclipses. I mean, okay, maybe possibly, but really, there's not a lot of, meat to that. There's not a lot of foundation to that. Meanwhile, in the world of science, they're able to show you when eclipses are going to happen, and they happen. They've been able to do this since I was a child. Since anyone watching this video was a child. This knowledge has been around. The flat earth model cannot predict planetary alignments. Again, same thing. Science lets you know when the planetary alignments are going to happen, these special alignments. And they happen. There's also people in the flat earth community who are saying, the moon's fake, it's a projection, it's a hologram. Here's what I know about the moon. I used to work in a group home, in a teen homeless shelter. Children with severe behavioral problems. I'm telling you, nights of the full moon, it would bring out the behavioral problems to a whole new level. It's obvious that the moon has a lot of control over us. Our feelings, our emotions, our behavior. When you study astrology, symbols such as mine, like I'm a Cancer, I'm somebody who's supposed to be ruled by the moon. And I notice on full moons, wild things often happen in my life. Next point. No one in the history of man, in the age of flight, has documented the ice wall or firmament. Think about it. How is this possible? The flat earth theory community is saying that there is a giant ice wall surrounding the entire earth. This should be very observable. And, the flat earth theory, it's been pretty popular for going on 2 years now. So how is it that no one's gone out, to one of these areas, taken a boat out here, flown a plane out here, and documented? We should be able to fly around the entire earth and document the entire ice wall, We should be able to fly a drone into a glass firmament. Why aren't these things happening? The reason they're not happening is because the earth is most likely not flat, and it's a sphere, and there is no giant ice wall. Now, is there a dome above us that cannot be escaped? Very possible. I will not be surprised at all if NASA can really not get into space. That would explain why they're faking the moon landing and more. That does not mean that the earth is flat, though. The flat earth model cannot account for the different stars seen from opposite hemispheres. And this is a major problem for the flat earth model. Depending on what hemisphere you're in, dictates what stars you're looking at. Think about it. The flat earth model does not explain the Coriolis effect. Now, a lot of people laugh at this Coriolis effect, but there's a lot of videos that have been uploaded with this flat earth debate going on. People in the military talking about sniping and accounting for the Coriolis effect. I know when you're in opposite hemispheres, when you flush the toilet, it spins in opposite direction. It seems to me that the Coriolis effect Israel, but the flat earth community wants to dismiss it because it hurts their belief system. And with regards to belief, the flat earth theory is based in belief. It's pretty much a religion, you know? I don't see a lot of critical thinking in the flat earth community. I do see a lot of good questions being asked, such as what's going on in Antarctica, which is a question I've been asking since well before the flat earth theory came around. There's obviously something very suspicious going on in Antarctica, but that doesn't mean the earth's flat. Again, the United Nations uses the flat earth as its symbol because it is the only way to show all of the nations of the world at once. People like to call me a globehead. I get that all the time. You're a globehead shill. Well, have you guys ever noticed that our heads look more like a globe than a flat plane? You know? I don't want to start calling you guys flatheads, but I mean, just think about it. This spherical shape, it's not an unnatural shape. Think about a water drop. Water can form into a circular shape. It does, and you've all seen it with your own eyes. Falls out of the sky in a circular shape. My friend Jeff, he always points out the word planet has plane in it, and he thinks that's a sign right before our eyes that the earth is a flat plane. You know, I do think that's interesting that the word plane is in planet. But then again, you want to break down all the words that we use in our vocabulary? I mean, I would like to know why they use the word planet. Where did this word planet come from? Planet. The sun sets behind the horizon because the earth is a sphere. And again, that's what I've been saying all this time. The one thing I've observed with my own eyes many times, watching the sun set behind the horizon. And look at all the disingenuous flat earth videos that try to make it look like the sun shrinks as it sets or gets bigger as it rises behind the horizon. Anyone who watches the sun with their own eyes realizes this does not happen. If there's cloud cover in the distance, it can look that way. It can create the illusion. But the sun sets behind a horizon. And you guys, if the earth were flat and it was just perspective making it look that way, guess what? You could take a powerful microscope and point it right where that sun just set, and you should be able to see it in an instant. But you can't, because it's set behind the horizon on the spherical earth. And look, for all of you who are saying you need the earth to be flat because that proves God to you, that's silly. That means that you need God proven to you through the Bible. And guess what? Your Bible was written by Freemasons, just like NASA was created by Freemasons. The Bible is not the word of God. It is the word of men who are interested in controlling the masses. God is a miracle maker. God could make a spherical earth, gravity, water stick to it, and more. Just as we're living on an earth with those exact realities. So what I'm going to do for the rest of this video is link this. This is a 3-part series that I put together for you. It's 54 minutes long. I agree with almost everything in here. The one knock I have on this video is how supportive they are of NASA. This video acts as if NASA and government is not corrupt and they don't participate in conspiracy. So that is one flaw in this video, but watch the rest. Everything else is sound. Everything else is scientific. As far as I'm aware, it's all truth. And look, I'm making this video again to help those of you who've become of the belief that the earth is flat. If you are interested in making this world a better place and stopping the wrongdoing going on, telling people the earth is flat 99 out of 100 times, maybe 9,999 times out of 10,000 times is not going to help you. It's just going to make you a dismissible character in the minds of the people you're talking to. And that is why the flat earth has been given to us to discredit us, to make us look like Looney Tunes, tinfoil hatters. Think about it. As you listen to me, recognize I'm someone that has spoken out since I was 18 years old. I'm now 33, and don't get carried away. I had to turn 33 at some point. But I've been speaking out all this time and trying to raise awareness about what's wrong in this world, get people to wake up to the wrongdoing. Most people think I'm crazy just for stating things that are obvious and logical and rational and can be proven. Unfortunately, that's how it is when you speak truth. People will just want to dismiss you as crazy. For example, when I was 18, I used to point out to people, look, I was 18 when September 11th happened. I would say, look, they're telling you that these buildings were brought down by terrorists, sponsored by Osama bin Laden, who's living in a cave. They're telling you the day of the incident that these planes brought down these towers, but at the same time, they're telling you they can't find any planes, but they've been able to find passports, turbans, cloth turbans, and box cutter knives. I said, just think about that. Does that sound like an honest story? And most people would say, oh man, what are you, some conspiracy theorist? Move out of the country then. What, you think they'd lie to us? So you know what I mean? I was making a very rational and logical point. If you can't understand what I was saying back then about not being able to find a plane, but at the same time find cloth turbans, paper passports, chintzy little box cutter knives. I mean, if you can't understand the logic of an argument like that, and that'll make you call a person crazy, imagine that if my rebuttal was, oh, okay, that point doesn't make sense to you. Well, let me tell you something else. The earth is flat. Then what do you think's going to happen? You know what I mean? So for those of you preaching flat earth, I ask that you really think about the points I made. Here's something else I want to say before I show you this video. The human body, the human eye, it can deceive you. There's a show called Brain Games. I think it's a National Geographic program. It's on Netflix now. You can stream it. It's an interesting show to watch. It shows just how easily our eyes can deceive us. And it really is mind-blowing watching it. And for those of you who look out and see a flat horizon and think that's proof of the flat earth, watch this show, Brain Games. It is very easy for our eyes to deceive us and our bodies as well. You know, there's people like Eric Dubay saying, you know, when you stand on the earth and you look up at the sky, do you feel like you're spinning at all? No, not at all. So clearly you're not. And I see a lot of you taking on these arguments. But look, the spin of the earth compared to its size, it's relatively slow. And because you've lived on the earth your whole life, you're adjusted to it. It's just normal. When things become normal, you don't feel them as you think you would. For example, imagine jumping into a bucket of ice water and being in it for 30 seconds. By the time you came out, you would be freezing cold to the bone. Imagine running into an industrial refrigerator, like in the back of a restaurant. Imagine running into that industrial refrigerator after coming out of the bucket of ice water. That fridge would feel warm to you. You know, you could instantly become a believer in the warm refrigerator theory. The fridge is warm. I feel it. Well, why does the fridge feel warm? Because you just came from something colder. That's the way it works with us. You know, we get used to something and it becomes the norm. Just like living on a spinning earth. You're not going to feel the spin. You're not going to feel the very slow spin. A lot of these flat earth videos trying to make it seem like we're just spinning crazy like a top. Everything is relative. So anyway, this video talks about all these things in greater detail. That'll be the rest of this. This is a 3-part series. I made it one video. I will link the creator of this video in the description. But please do watch this and think about it. Think. That is the key word, not believe. Until next time, Truth Seeker.
The Earth is not flat. We live on a spinning globe. It's amazing to me that I actually have to say those words in 2016. But there are a number of scientifically confused people that have convinced themselves and are trying to convince others that we live on a stationary, flat plane. There are a number of reasons for this resurgence of a long-extinct belief system, including literal interpretations of the Bible, scientific illiteracy, cherry-picking and other errors in reasoning, and a general distrust of government leading to imagined conspiracy theories. I don't for a second think that NASA, along with every other public and private space enterprise, and every other scientifically literate person in the entire world, are involved in a massive conspiracy to hide the truth from us. That's a claim that demands really strong evidence. But let's leave them out of it. I cannot prove to you that the images and videos from space are real, and you cannot prove that they are fake. But we don't need to believe them. We can prove the globe and the heliocentric model to ourselves without them, just as generations of people did long before NASA or anyone else went to space. In a series of short videos, I would like to teach you how you can prove to yourself with your own eyes and experimentation that we live on a spinning globe. Several things that we can see with our own eyes clearly demonstrate that the Earth is a globe and cannot be adequately explained by the flat Earth model, no matter how you try to twist reality. These include the apparent movements of the sun, moon, planets, and stars, moon phases, lunar eclipses, time zones, and many others. But in this first video, I'm going to focus on just one thing: the horizon. The most important thing to understand is that the horizon is flat. That's right. From our vantage point, even from a high mountain or an airplane, the horizon is flat. Flat earthers, and also many globalists, for lack of a better term, seem to think that the horizon should look curved to us. That's flat wrong. And I think this is the single biggest reason there even is a flat earth community, the biggest source of confusion. You are expecting to see a curve where there is none to be seen. You are looking for the wrong thing. To picture what I mean, look at this orange. If I take a thin slice of it, I get a round disc. The edges of it, where the knife cut through, is a flat circle. That is what you see when you look at the horizon, the edges of a circle. The edges don't curve side to side, they run straight across our view. And since we are always in the center of the circle, they don't curve down. When you can see the horizon in all directions, it is the same distance away in all directions. So when you spin around, it looks exactly like a straight line and comes back around to join itself. Think about that. If it were curved down, it would not come back around and join itself at the same level. Even from a high mountain or from an airliner, the horizon is flat, because the Earth is so big and we are so close to it. All we are ever going to see is a small, flat, round slice of the ball of the Earth. There's a handy website that will calculate the distance to the horizon for any viewing height, and it also tells you how much of an object will be hidden behind the horizon if it's past the horizon. The site is metabunk.org/curve. Let's look at an example. This is the view from the J.P. Morgan Chase Tower, the tallest building in Houston. The observation deck is 879 feet above the flat Texas landscape. According to the Metabunk site calculation, the horizon is about 36 miles away. So this is what the horizon looks like on a map, a circle with a 36-mile radius. As we zoom out, you can see what a small part of the Earth this is, under 1% of the Earth's diameter of 7,918 miles. And when we show it edge on, you can really see that it is just a small, flat, round slice of the large Earth. But getting back to the orange, you might be thinking that the slice of the orange is not flat. It curves down in all directions from the center. Well, yes, that is true for the orange, and it's also true for the Earth. And you can clearly see that on the orange. But on the Earth, it is simply impossible to see, because the Earth is so tremendously big. If you are 6 feet tall, and you stand at the shore of the ocean, or on a flat desert plain, the horizon is about 3 miles away. and the change in vertical height of the surface is only 1.5 feet, spread evenly over the entire 3-mile distance. You just aren't going to be able to see that. It's way too subtle. As an illustration, this is a Google Earth picture of the New York City skyline from Caven Point, New Jersey, just over 3 miles away. The Earth does indeed curve down away from the viewer in this picture, but it is just about 1.5 feet, spread over 3 miles, so it is just too slight to see. The Statue of Liberty is in the picture, and it's 305 feet tall, and only 1.2 miles away, and look how small it looks. But if the horizon is flat, how does it prove around Earth, you might ask? It's what happens when objects are past the horizon that reveals the curve. Sailors, for many centuries, have noticed that ships sailing away from you in the distance disappear bottom first and sail last. If you live near a large body of water, you can easily see this for yourself with binoculars or a telescope. But here is a video you can watch of a cruise liner going over the horizon. See the link in the description for the full video. This only works on a curved Earth. The view of the ship is obviously going behind the curve, and you can always calculate exactly how far away this will happen, depending on how high you are up from the water. The higher up, the farther away the horizon. Flat earthers try to explain this phenomenon away in a few ways. Some claim that the ships aren't actually hidden by the curve, they are just at the limits of our ability to see them, and if you zoom in, they come back into full view. But whenever they try to demonstrate this, they use a boat that is near the horizon, but not beyond it, like this one. Notice, he did not show a boat that was hidden at the bottom. This is just a blatantly wrong example to use. I don't know how they think this explains anything. The examples they use are always not beyond the horizon, but near it, or right at it. To show the effect, you have to show a boat partially obscured by the horizon, like this, not this. Some will show a boat in choppy seas and claim that the swells are causing the obscuring of the bottom of the boat. But again, that's a bad example to use. Do you think there are swells big enough to hide half of this cruise ship? Also, you will need a clear day and one without extreme cold. Cold air near the water can create a number of different mirage effects because the temperature differences actually bends the light. But you can usually tell when this is happening, and it only happens in certain conditions. Also, the sun and moon rising and setting beyond the horizon perfectly shows that the Earth is curved, and they are much easier to see than distant boats. They both emerge from or slide behind the horizon exactly as we expect on a globe, and not at all what we would see on a flat Earth. Flat Earthers claim that the sun and moon circle above the flat Earth, and the rising and setting is due to them coming in and out of view due to perspective. As explained, and I use the term loosely, in this clip from Flat Earther P. Brain.
Okay, here's a little illustrator or a little cartoon from a website called timeanddate.com. It's really funny that they would have a perfect illustration of a sun rising and setting on a flat Earth due to perspective. You'll notice that it rises from below the horizon and sets below the horizon. Now you might be saying, well, how's that possible? I can see now you're saying that it rises and lowers due to perspective, but how does it disappear below the horizon? Well, I got a theory about that. Because of the fact that all parallel lines and planes converge at your eye level horizon, this is according to the perspective, I'm not making this up. If in fact, and they do, they converge at your eye level horizon visually, then it makes sense that after that point, they diverge, meaning they then separate. So the sun would continue on a downward track. As you can see from my illustration here, the lines would go to your horizon, and then afterwards, they would spread out and separate, kind of like a starburst.
Two huge problems here. One is that he shows a sun in the animation that always stays the same size, which indeed is what we see in reality. But if it were disappearing due to perspective, it would be getting bigger as it rises and smaller as it sets. But in his animation, it does not. the edges of the circle of the sun would get farther apart and closer together, just as all the sight lines he drew in do. Why would everything get smaller as it moves away except the sun or moon? That's absurd. Here is what we actually see. The sun and moon slide behind the horizon and maintain their visual sides. That is not perspective. Perspective works both vertically and horizontally. Objects farther away appear smaller and closer together in both directions. If the sun and moon were just circling over the flat earth and getting too far away to see, then we would see them shrink and fade out of view as they set. But we don't. Flat earthers will show you videos where the sun appears to grow or shrink, but this is an illusion due to thick clouds. You can always see that there are clouds near the horizon when they try to show this. Normally, this illusion does not happen. The second way this so-called perspective matrix fails is even more ridiculous. The lines drawn in the illustration are lines of sight, and they correctly converge to the vanishing point, the point at which you can't see farther. But he claims that past the vanishing point, the lines diverge. What? What lines? It's a vanishing point. There are no lines of sight past a vanishing point. There is nothing to diverge. You can't have lines of sight past what you could see. And if it did work that way, we could see objects beyond the horizon and they would be upside down. Think about that. No, this is totally wrong. Another way to demonstrate the curve is with distant city skylines. A good example is the city of Toronto, viewed from across Lake Ontario. The city is dominated by the distinctive CN Tower, currently the third tallest tower in the world at 1,815 feet. There are many pictures online of the Toronto skyline, viewed from Niagara-on-the-Lake, New York, 30 miles away. With the metabunk calculation, we see that 486 feet of the tower, or about 26% of it, should be hidden behind the curve of the Earth from that distance. And this is exactly what we see, as you can easily tell when compared to an image of the full tower at the same scale. Flat earthers sometimes show cities in the distance that, according to them, should be below the horizon but are clearly visible, and claim this proves the flat earth. This can be difficult to disprove because you never really know where the picture was taken from. They may have gotten the distance wrong, or the height of the observation wrong, or the calculation wrong. One example they use is the Chicago skyline seen from 60 miles away across Lake Michigan. At a viewing height of 6 feet, we calculate that 2,166 feet should be below the horizon at 60 miles. So they are right that the entire city of Chicago should be completely hidden. And it is hidden nearly all the time, but sometimes it can be seen from that far away due to a type of atmospheric light refraction phenomenon called a superior mirage. A superior mirage is caused by colder air below warmer air, which bends the light around the curve of the Earth. This event sometimes makes the news for the very reason that it is a rare occurrence.
Until I found this photo from Grandmere State Park. This is from Joshua Nowicki, and what you're seeing here is a mirage. We typically would not be able to see this from the Lake Michigan shore. We talked about this last night. Conditions are right on the lake that we're actually seeing a mirage of the Chicago skyline.
You can tell that it's a mirage because there is lots of distortion. The Willis Tower on the left is clearly elongated. And also, there are videos of this same view that show the buildings dancing around, changing shape, and even disappearing. Even though this is a mirage, the bottom parts of the buildings are clearly still obscured from view, just as we expect. If the Earth was flat, you could see the buildings on any clear day, not just rarely when the conditions are right for refraction. Flat earthers use these rare events to try to prove the Earth is flat, but that makes no sense. It's called cherry picking, a favorite trick of all types of science deniers. You don't get to pick the anomalies that seem to agree with your views and ignore the common observations that don't, and still call yourself an honest investigator. That is intellectually dishonest. As I have shown, the horizon is all we really need to know that we live on a sphere. But there are other observations you can make yourself that all perfectly fit the heliocentric globe model when you understand it, as I will explain in future videos. Thanks for watching. This is part 2 of a series called Proving the Earth is Not Flat. In this series, I intend to demonstrate how anyone can prove to themselves, using simple observations and experiments, that the Earth is not flat. It is a spinning and moving sphere. In this part, we will look to the stars. But first, to understand the shape and movements of the Earth, we need to understand how it works within the context of the solar system and the distant stars that surround it. The nature of the Earth, solar system, and stars took many centuries to figure out. The Greek mathematician Pythagoras was the first to propose that the Earth was a sphere in the 6th century BCE, but it wasn't accepted by most of the world until the Middle Ages between the 5th and 15th centuries. So, flat earthers, you are only about 600 years behind the curve. Because we live on the surface of the Earth, we are limited to seeing it from our perspective. Or at least we were back then. So when our perspective is limited, scientists create conceptual models and test them against observations. If a model cannot explain all observations and experiments, you either modify the model until everything fits, or throw out the model and start over. The prevailing model in the Middle Ages was the geocentric model, with the spherical Earth at the center of everything, and the sun, moon, and stars revolving around us. And to the casual observer, from our perspective, that is what it looks like. But while the model explained many observations, it failed to adequately explain some of them. Most notably, the apparent retrograde motions of the planets. Copernicus solved that problem by realizing that the sun is the center of the system, not the Earth, and the heliocentric model still works to this day to perfectly explain all observations, measurements, and experiments. Also, the ultimate test of any scientific model is its ability to predict future events. Using the heliocentric model, we can accurately predict lunar and solar eclipses, conjunctions, planetary alignments, and many other phenomena down to the minute or second. This is how real science works. No flat Earth model has ever been able to explain all astronomical observations, let alone make accurate predictions. I challenge any flat earther to use your model to predict the next lunar eclipse. So let's see how our view of the stars fits with the heliocentric model, and compare it to the flat Earth model. In the heliocentric model, the Earth spins on its axis once per day. The axis is tilted about 23.5 degrees, and that tilt constantly points in the same direction as the Earth revolves around the Sun once per year. This tilt is the cause of our seasons, and the seasonal variation in the length of daylight. The stars around us are very far away, but all the stars we see without powerful telescopes are circling the Milky Way galaxy with us, in the same direction and the same speed, so they are essentially stationary from our frame of reference. It is this backdrop of stationary stars we can look to understand the shape and movements of the Earth, as I will explain. In the Northern Hemisphere, we look at the stars and we see star formations we all recognize, such as the Big Dipper, the Little Dipper, and Cassiopeia. But in the Southern Hemisphere, these constellations cannot be seen at all, and different star formations are seen, such as the Southern Cross and Centaurus. And some constellations near the celestial equator, such as Orion, can be seen in both hemispheres. This makes perfect sense for the spherical Earth. Northern observers are looking generally upward toward the North Pole, and southern observers are looking generally downward toward the South Pole, and seeing different stars. The curvature of the Earth is what blocks the stars of the other hemisphere from view. To illustrate, these blue arrows represent the direction an observer in the north views the stars in the sky. And the red arrows are the direction of the stars viewable by an observer in the south. They intersect in the middle, but you can see how the shape of the Earth limits our view of the opposite hemisphere. In contrast, on the flat Earth model, the north is the center, and the south is a ring around it. The stars would have to be arranged in a dome shape over the flat Earth. In this model, it makes no sense that people in the north cannot see the southern stars, and vice versa. And it is particularly absurd that people in the outer ring can all see the same southern stars, but not the northern stars at all. There should be nothing blocking their view of all the northern stars. Also, consider that on nights when the moon is visible, we all see the same moon running across the sky, everywhere on Earth, and we see the stars behind it. This works perfectly fine on the heliocentric model. But when you look north from the outer ring of the flat Earth model, there is no logical reason you would not see the northern stars behind the moon. The moon is supposedly close by and circling above near the equator. And you would be looking northward with the moon near the center of the sky. But somehow the northern stars can't be seen? This is an insurmountable failure of the flat Earth model. And it only gets worse for the flat Earth model. The nightly rotation of stars is perfectly explained by the Earth's rotation on its axis. Every night, we see the stars rise and set overhead. They move very slowly, but if you watch for half an hour or so, you will notice them change positions, moving from east to west. In the northern hemisphere, you will also notice the stars to the north rotate counterclockwise around a central point, called the celestial pole, very near a star called Polaris. You can easily see this yourself. Look for the Big Dipper, and the end of the dipper always points to Polaris, a relatively bright star. With patience, you can watch the Big Dipper and the other nearby stars rotate around Polaris each night. This phenomenon is a favorite subject of professional and amateur stargazers, and you can find many long-exposure photographs and time-lapses of it. In the southern hemisphere, when you look to the south, you also see stars rotate around a point, but they are different stars, and they rotate in the opposite direction, clockwise. There is a star named Sigma Octantis very near the southern celestial pole, but is not a very bright star, so it is difficult to see. This apparent spinning of the stars around a north and south axis is perfectly explained by the heliocentric globe model, as the spherical Earth rotates on its axis and our view of the essentially stationary distant stars rotates. The distant stars to the north and south spin around a point because we are seeing them over the spinning axis of the Earth. Depending on how far north or south you are, some stars stay above the horizon all night long. These are called circumpolar stars. But they are completely different stars in the north and in the south. How would this work in the flat Earth model? Well, to put it simply, it couldn't. In any flat Earth model, the stars would have to be arranged in a semi-spherical dome over the flat circular Earth, and Polaris would have to be in the center, and that would seem to explain what we see in the north. But south of the equator, the outer concentric ring in the flat Earth model, now you have huge problems. When you look to the south in South America, in southern Africa, or in Australia, you see the same clockwise spinning stars. Yet people in those three locations would be looking in three different directions when looking to the south. Yet somehow they see the same thing. Where could the southern celestial pole and the circumpolar stars be in this model? Are they in many places at once? No, it simply cannot work. Of course, not all three of these distant locations are all in nighttime at the same time, but two of them at a time are, and the celestial pole and circumpolar stars stay visible all night long and are always directly to the south. I know some of you are going to claim that it simply doesn't look like that in the South, and that all images of it are faked. I'm not asking you to take my word for it. You could go and see it for yourself. But I do recognize that it is not cheap or convenient to travel to the Southern Hemisphere if you live in the North, and I have never been there myself. But if you were to go, I am extremely confident you will see the southern constellations, such as the Southern Cross, and also you will see the stars rotating clockwise around the southern celestial pole. Why am I so sure? Independent confirmation. No scientific claim ever comes from a single observer or a single observation. Science demands that observations are independently confirmed. And in this day and age, you can easily get independent confirmation yourself by finding someone on social media that lives anywhere in the Southern Hemisphere and asking them what they see at night. Or find any number of independently produced videos of it on YouTube. Of course, people lie and videos can be faked. But if you pick people at random, there is no reason to think they are part of a conspiracy, especially if you don't tell them why you are asking. And the more independent, neutral sources you can find, the less likely it is that they are all wrong or lying. If the stars in the South did not actually appear the way they teach it in all the schools of the world, a great many people would have noticed it, as anyone in the entire hemisphere can look at the stars. There is no way to hide them. But no one, outside of a few flat earthers, have ever said the stars don't look right in the South. Nearly the entire population of the Southern Hemisphere would have to be in on a conspiracy, or somehow deluded, if the stars didn't actually appear, as people have been reporting for centuries. The Southern Cross is actually depicted on the national flags of 5 Southern Hemisphere countries: Australia, New Zealand, Brazil, Papua New Guinea, and Samoa. I'm not asking you to believe me. Either go there yourself or find multiple independent sources to tell you or show you what they see in the sky. Another thing we notice in the real world is that the stars that are near the celestial equator change throughout the seasons. We can see Orion in the winter. In spring, we see the sickle of Leo the lion. In summer, Scorpius dominates the equatorial sky, and the fall brings the great square of Pegasus into view. This is explained by the Earth's orbit around the Sun. The night side of the Earth rotates around, and thus our nighttime view points outward to different stars. There is no valid explanation for this observation in the flat Earth model, and this brings up a subject that confuses some flat earthers. They say if the Earth orbits around the Sun, why doesn't noon become midnight 6 months later? Why don't the day and night times reverse? The answer is that our system of measuring time already takes the orbit of the Earth around the Sun into consideration automatically. Noon is when the Sun is the highest in the sky, and the time from one noon to the next noon is divided into a 24-hour day. This is called a solar day. But because the Earth orbits around the Sun about 1 degree every day, the Earth actually has to rotate a little bit more than 360 degrees for the Sun to be directly overhead at the same place. A full 360-degree rotation in relation to the distant stars is actually a little bit shorter than 24 hours, about 23 hours and 56 minutes. This is called a sidereal day. So that's why noon doesn't become midnight 6 months later. And this orbit around the Sun explains why the stars we see at night near the celestial equator change throughout the year. The night side of the Earth rotates around, revealing different stars. There's one more thing flat earthers complain about regarding our view of the stars that I want to address. They ask, why does Polaris, and all the other stars as well, remain in the same place from our perspective year after year if the Earth is rotating on its axis and on a 23.5 degree tilt, and also revolving around the Sun, and also moving around the Milky Way galaxy. This is no problem at all when you understand it. The Earth's daily rotation on its axis accounts for the rotation we see in the sky and around the 2 celestial poles, as I've shown. And since Polaris is near the North Celestial Pole, it stays close to the same position. Also, as I already explained, All the stars we see with the naked eye, including Polaris, are revolving around the Milky Way with us, in the same direction and close to the same speed. So that will not cause the stars to change their relative position in our sky in the short term. Just like how other cars on a freeway moving with you seem to stand still. And one revolution around the Milky Way takes about 225 million years. So we are essentially moving in a straight line. With Earth's moving around the Sun, the Earth's axis stays pointed in the same direction in relation to the stars. And since Polaris is so tremendously far away, our view of it does not change noticeably. We're going to need some simple trigonometry to demonstrate this, but I'll use an online triangle calculator to make it easy. The latest estimate for the distance to Polaris is 323 light years. This is an unimaginable 1.8 quadrillion miles, or 1.8 thousand billion miles. Our trip around the Sun is only about 186 million miles, which is a tiny fraction in comparison. So, if we form a triangle from Polaris to the Earth, and over to the location of the Earth 6 months later on the other side of the Sun, we can calculate the distance that Polaris will seem to move from our perspective. The change in its viewing angle. This is called its parallax. When we plug in the distances of all three sides of the triangle into this triangle calculator, we find that the angle we view Polaris only changes by, are you ready? 0.0000566 degrees. There is just no way you are going to notice that. This is why Polaris and all the other stars maintain their visual position year after year. They are just so tremendously far away. So we see that just looking up at the stars provides further confirmation that the Earth is a spinning and moving sphere. When you understand what you are seeing, and you understand how it fits with the heliocentric model. The heliocentric model is the correct model because it perfectly explains all observations, experiments, and measurements. Not because some government agency or secret society says so. Science works by observation, independent confirmation, experimentation, testing, and making accurate predictions, never by authority. And science is really open to everyone. Go out and look at the stars yourself and test the models against what you see. No flat Earth model can even come close to properly explaining what we see in the stars, or any of the other observations I discuss in this series. That's why it was thrown out centuries ago. Thanks for watching. This is part 3 in the series, Proving the Earth is Not Flat. The goal of this series is to show you how you can prove to yourself, with your own observations and experiments, that the Earth is a sphere. Today we will look at the Moon. It is important to understand a number of facts about the Moon so that I can show you how our observations of it can demonstrate that the Earth is a sphere, and how it can only work within the heliocentric globe model and not in any flat Earth model. The Moon is a sphere that orbits the Earth about once every 27 days. Some flat earthers will claim that the Moon is a flat disk, or just a light in the sky, or some sort of projection, or even a hologram. All of these are absurd and easily refuted by the evidence. The fact that there are many different explanations, and again I use the term loosely, for the Moon within the flat Earth community should tell you something. There is only one explanation in the heliocentric model, the right one. But how do we know the Moon is a solid sphere? Because no matter where you are on the Earth, when you look at the full moon, it is always circular. Only a sphere looks round from all vantage points. If it were a flat disk, a light, or projection, circling above the flat Earth, just a few thousand miles up, it would appear to look elliptical as it moves away from us, like this, because our viewing angle would change. Also, as I pointed out in part 1, it would shrink and disappear as it moved away, like this, if it were only due to perspective, as flat earthers claim. It never does this. It slides behind the horizon at the same shape and size as it was when it was overhead. Also, when you look closely at the moon with magnification, you can see that the circular craters appear increasingly elliptical as they approach the edges, and exactly in the right direction, due to the curvature of the moon's spherical surface. The moon's phases are caused by the light of the sun reflecting off the moon. As the moon revolves around the earth, we see it at different angles in relation to the sun's light. The moonlight takes on a series of shapes as it goes through its monthly cycle. You can see with a simple demonstration that any sphere lit from one side and viewed from different angles will take on these shapes. Also, it's important to remember that the sun is about 400 times farther away than the moon, so sometimes the lighted side doesn't look like it points directly to the sun, but you have to think three-dimensionally to see that it does. Some flat earthers think the phases of the moon are supposed to be caused by the Earth's shadow. That is wrong. The shadow we normally see on the moon is just the moon's own shadow, the side that is shaded because it is away from the sun. This is very different from lunar eclipses, when the Earth's shadow is seen on the moon. More on that later. Some flat earthers will claim the moon gives off its own light, rather than reflecting the sun's light. This is simply impossible. What mechanism could possibly explain how a big rock gives off light, which just happens to move across the surface in a pattern corresponding to the direction of the sun? And when the moon is less than full, it is easy to see shadows in its craters and on the side of its mountains, proving that the light is external. The moon cannot be its own light source. It cannot work, it makes no sense, and has no plausible mechanism. The evidence all shows that the moon is a big, reflecting, spherical rock. When we look at the moon from anywhere on Earth, we see the same face of it, with the same distinctive craters and large dark areas called mare. This is because the moon rotates at the same rate that it revolves around the Earth. It does this because the pull of the Earth's gravity caused a slight bulging of the moon, and gradually that slowed the moon down until its rotation rate, relative to the Earth, reached zero. This is called tidal locking, and it is not unique to our moon. It occurs in most of the large moons in our solar system as well, and also the planet Mercury. The moon is about 239,000 miles from Earth. In most diagrams of the Earth and moon, you will see them close together like this, but this is not nearly the correct scale. When drawn to scale, we see that the moon is way out in the distance, about 30 times the width of the Earth away. This is why we are able to see the same face of it from everywhere on Earth. At that distance, our angle of view is essentially the same from all locations on Earth. How do we know it's that far away? Well, there are a number of ways to determine the distance to the moon. One way is by measuring the moon's angle above the horizon simultaneously from two distant points on Earth, and then using simple trigonometry to calculate the height. When this is done, the distance to the moon is calculated to around 239,000 miles, and this closely matches other modern methods of measuring the distance, including radar and lasers, and also ancient methods, such as using lunar eclipse geometry. But since the method uses the horizon, the calculation works out quite differently if you assume the Earth is flat, because you then assume the horizon is the same in both locations, while on the curved Earth you need to compensate for the curve of the Earth between the 2 points. So, assuming a flat Earth puts the moon much closer, and flat earthers calculate the moon is only about 3,000 miles away. So how can we tell who is right? Well, besides all the other evidence for the curved Earth, we know the moon cannot possibly be that close, due to the simple fact that everyone on Earth always sees the same face of the moon when it is visible in the sky. If it were only 3,000 miles away, that simply would not be possible. Let's look at an example on the flat Earth map to demonstrate this. When the moon is visible, you can see it from Maine in North America and southern Argentina and South America at the same time, since they are at the same longitude. They are each about 3,000 miles from the equator. So, if the moon is only 3,000 miles high, above the equator on the flat Earth, when viewed from the side, this forms a right triangle, with the viewing angles to the moon being 45 degrees in each location. Anyone notice the problem? This means that in each location, a person would be viewing the moon at an angle that is about 90 degrees different from the other location. They simply could not possibly both see the same features on the same side of the moon, but of course, in reality, they do. Also, if the moon is full for the northern observer, it would be only about half full for the southern observer. But we know that the moon's phases are seen almost exactly the same everywhere on the Earth at the same time. The only way you could see the same side of the moon and the same phase everywhere on Earth is if it is far out in the distance, so that all viewing angles are essentially the same. You can verify this yourself. Find someone in a different part of the world and ask them what phase the moon is in. They will always see the same phase that you see, or very close to it, on the same day. This is not possible with a close moon circling above a flat Earth. Another way the moon reveals the shape of the Earth is with lunar eclipses. This is when the Earth's round shadow can be seen crossing the face of the moon. They can happen as often as once every 6 months, and are visible everywhere on the night side of the Earth when they occur. They don't happen every month for one simple reason. The moon's orbit around the Earth is tilted about 5 degrees from the Earth's orbit around the sun. When shown to proper scale, with the moon about 30 Earth diameters away, you can see how the orbital tilt of 5 degrees can cause the moon to pass below or above Earth's shadow. This animation shows the variation of the moon's position in relation to the Earth's shadow when it reaches full moon each month. Most months it passes above or below the shadow. Only when the angle of the moon's orbit is aligned with Earth's orbit at full moon does a lunar eclipse occur. This is a great example of how flat earthers' objections to the globe are based on a misunderstanding of the facts. They often claim an eclipse should happen every month, but this is because they do not understand the scale of the Earth-Moon system and the 5-degree tilt of the moon's orbit. They are not arguing against the actual facts. They are arguing against their own ideas of how they think it is supposed to work. This is called a straw man fallacy. When you get the facts right and understand all the relationships, scales, and concepts involved, you will see it really all does work. Your biggest problem is your misunderstanding of the model. My goal is to clear up as many of these misunderstandings as I can. When the orbit of the moon is aligned with the Earth at full moon, a full or partial lunar eclipse occurs, and we see the large circular shadow of the Earth pass over the moon. The Earth is about 4 times the size of the moon, but its shadow on the moon is a little less than that because the shadow is slightly cone-shaped. Since we know the distance to the moon, we can calculate the size of the Earth from its shadow using simple geometry, which comes out to 7,917 miles in diameter, and this matches all other measurements. As the moon is covered by the Earth's shadow, it begins to appear reddish, often called a blood moon. This occurs because of the reddish light of the Earth's atmosphere glowing on the darkened moon. It's red for the same reason sunsets are often red. Red light can pass through the atmosphere and not get scattered much, while light at the blue end of the spectrum is more easily scattered. So at sunrise and sunset, when the sunlight travels a long path through the atmosphere, the blue light has been mostly removed, leaving mostly red and yellow light remaining. The eclipsed moon is lit by a sunset that circles the globe from its perspective. This red color is further confirmation that the lunar eclipse is caused by the shadow of the Earth. I've seen some flat earthers claim that it is impossible to cast a red shadow. No, that's just wrong. The Earth doesn't really cast a red shadow on the moon per se. It blocks the most direct white light of the sun and shines a dim red light on the darkened surface. What is the Flat Earth model's explanation for lunar eclipses? They really don't have one. Some of them claim it is probably due to a semi-transparent disk passing in front of the sun and shading the moon, sometimes called the anti-moon or shadow object. But they have no observations of it outside of eclipses, and no explanation for what it is, why it never casts shade on the Earth or blocks the stars, what holds it up, or what makes it move. It's just a special pleading fallacy with zero evidence, an attempt to save their belief from contradictory evidence. Another serious problem with the Flat Earth model is that Flat Earthers never explain what force keeps the moon circling above the flat Earth. There is no known force that can do this. Is it magic? Is it supposed to be attached to the dome or firmament? They never really say. But of course, that could not work because it moves at a different speed and in a different path than the stars and the sun and the planets. And also, it goes in front of the sun during solar eclipses. And also, the moon's orbit, like nearly all other orbits, is not perfectly circular, but slightly elliptical. So its distance from Earth varies, and we can see this because its apparent visual size varies by as much as 12%. What force in the flat Earth model can cause that? Does it go up and down? Does it shrink and grow? In reality, we know exactly what keeps the moon moving across our sky. It's called gravity. The moon orbits the Earth due to the pull of Earth's gravity. Many of you have said that gravity has never been proven, or even that it doesn't exist. It's hard for me to describe exactly how ridiculous that is. I am still astounded when I hear a flat earther say this. You are denying something that we all easily observe every day. There is no force or phenomenon that is more scientifically proven than gravity. You don't have to understand the physics of why it works to see that it does work, and works the same everywhere in the universe. The same force that is holding you down right now, and has for your entire life, is the same force that causes all dropped or thrown objects to be pulled back down to the Earth in a precisely predictable way, and is the same force that holds the moon circling around the Earth. This is how all orbits work. Smaller objects near bigger objects are pulled in by gravity. Some will crash right into the bigger object, and some will be going too fast and fly on by. But if they are going the right speed, they will be pulled into an elliptical path around the object. But that pull is counteracted by the centrifugal force outward caused by the revolutions around the object. And because there is virtually no friction in space, objects can remain in orbit indefinitely. A very easy way to observe orbits, other than our own moon, is to look at the moons of Jupiter through a telescope. I've done this many times, and it's a very amazing sight. If you don't have a telescope, find someone who does. There are astronomy clubs all over the world that will gladly let you have a look. The 4 biggest moons of Jupiter orbit the planet in a short amount of time, and you can actually see their movements within a single night. Their movements are exactly predicted by the force of gravity, the same force that keeps our moon in orbit around the Earth. You really cannot honestly say gravity has never been proven. This sight alone proves it, and you can see it for yourself. When I started this series, I really didn't think I would have to explain that gravity exists and how we know it exists. It is something we all experience constantly, and we can easily test it ourselves. Unless you are completely delusional, you accept that things are pulled down. So your only problem, really, is the direction of the pull. On a giant sphere with trillions of tons of mass, the direction of pull is toward the center of mass of the sphere. You take it for granted that things are always pulled down, but down is relative. Everywhere on Earth, down is toward the center. And no, gravity is not just density and buoyancy. Density and buoyancy are factors in how gravity works, but alone they don't explain the consistent direction of the force. It's gravity that causes the force to have a specific direction, down toward the center of the Earth. Since we are talking about gravity, I want to address another issue that keeps coming up. Flat Earthers keep asking how gravity can hold everything to the Earth, including the oceans, if it is spinning at 1,000 miles per hour. Well, there is a huge misconception here. Yes, it is true that the surface of the Earth does move at about 1,000 miles per hour at the equator, but that is irrelevant and misleading. The Earth only spins once per day. That is very slow. When you say 1,000 miles per hour, you make it seem like the Earth spins very fast, like a top. And some flat earthers use words like rapidly, fast, and whizzing around when describing the spin. It doesn't whiz around. It barely moves. The speed of the stars moving overhead each night is the speed of the rotation, and you won't notice them move without watching for a long time. The Earth spins once per day. That is twice as slow as the hour hand on your watch. It's only 15 degrees per hour. The only reason it is 1,000 miles per hour at the surface is because the Earth is so big. And a slow spin doesn't generate a lot of centrifugal force. Think of it this way. Hold a ball on a string and spin around fast. The ball is pulled outward by centrifugal force. Now, spin so slowly that it takes a full day to make one rotation. The ball will hang right down. Because the spin is so slow, there is almost no centrifugal force. That is the same for the Earth. The centrifugal force is so weak, it is only about 0.3% as strong as the pull of gravity. That is why we don't feel it, and why nothing, including the oceans, gets flung off into space. We can actually measure the tiny effect of centrifugal force, because objects weigh slightly less at the equator than they do at the poles. Every time you hear someone imply the Earth spins really fast at 1,000 miles per hour, think once per day. If I can get you to understand this simple concept, you will start to see why it's perfectly reasonable that we live on a spinning ball. All your objections are based on misconceptions, misunderstandings of physics, geometry, and scale, and flat-out denial of easily observable facts. Once again, I have shown you observations we can all make that show us the Earth must be a sphere. There is no other reasonable way to explain these facts. The flat Earth model cannot explain why we all see the same face of the moon and also the same phase of the moon from every spot on Earth on the same day. And it cannot explain why we have lunar eclipses that show us the Earth's round shadow in precisely the predicted size, position, and time. Flat Earthers struggle to explain these things with outlandish, implausible, and unsupported claims. Some of these would require inventing whole new laws of physics to explain them. But there is no need for that, because the heliocentric globe model explains all of it, with easily observed and tested physical forces. Thanks for watching.